much for joining us today.
Just checking it's recording, everybody.
Recording.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Romi, for joining us today at our home, in our offices, to continue our conversation about quantum and tech for good and the UN sustainability goals. I think today we can cover more ground than what we did in the Twitter spaces the other day. And for those who actually did not get to join us in the Twitter spaces, we had a fascinating chat about quantum and sustainability. So I would really want to kick off things with you introducing yourself. You have a background from investment banking, then your entrepreneurial aspect with the Oblique Life, and now business development in a quantum company. So what has been your trajectory and how you ended up in tech?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me back again. It's really cool to continue this very important conversation. So I think, a bit about my background. I started my journey, as you said, in investment banking. It was a really great learning curve. And then I decided I wanted to start my own company, which was all about building, these multicultural communities that I saw as the future leaders of kind of our business and society, bringing them together, helping them interact, engage. And then as we evolved as an organization, it was to see how can we help them, create as much impact as possible, whether it was, like I said, in their business world or in their social life. And it was such a fulfilling journey and experience. And it was through that I started seeing the importance of the UN SDG goals, for example, and how, for example, really strong social structures, community, but also a kind of open thinking and open forum of mindset could help us innovate and think about the goals that we need. And that's why I came across technology. And I was like, if we can bring technology, people, business, and policy together, that's the kind of, I think that kind of combination isn't really happening so much yet. We see all these different aspects try to grow and do things in their own path in their journey, but not in a kind of centralized or interconnected way. And that's how I came into technology and came across this incredible this new technology called quantum computing. And when I spoke to the team at Terra Quantum, and they said, look, we're looking to now start scaling the business with this quantum computing and quantum security, I just said, you get very few chances in life to be at the forefront of the next evolution of something, but equally to shape something that can actually have a really positive impact. And that's why I joined Terra Quantum. I thought this is a great chance to bring all my experience of this community, how we can, drive impact, but now use an actual and develop a tool that can be, driven for good. So now I work in quantum computing. I'm the head of business development and partnerships, and it is such an incredible space to be in. Honestly, it's like every day you kind of, I always say to people, it feels like I'm working at Google in the 1990s, just before Google became what it is. It's that moment of everything is possible, but at the same time, we've got so much to do, so many challenges in front of us to get there. So it's that beautiful combination of excitement and challenges.
Certainly it's going to dictate the next generation of processing power, and now with the advancements of AI and how we can actually leverage how quantum can be an enabler of all of this. But we will get to that.
Yeah.
I would want to stay first on the origins and then get into the quantum stuff. So you've been, let's touch a little bit about the Oblique Life, and because obviously you mentioned a little bit what was the ethos behind it, but I would like to get a little bit more deeper into what is exactly the Oblique Life, and what's the philosophy behind and the impact that you want to create.
Yeah, in simplicity, and this was actually one of our biggest challenges as a company, was really clearly defining what we were in one or two sentences when we were so many different things. But if I really think back and look at what we then evolved into, our whole mission is about bringing people together to create as much positive impact for society as possible. That's what we always, sought out to do. It started more on a lifestyle basis, cultural enrichment, supporting different emerging artists, looking at different creativity, how we can help filmmakers or musicians, grow in London, which was our home and base. And then we started evolving more into the business space and started thinking, how do we leverage different people's careers, different people's businesses, different people's ideas or thought process, and create these shared spaces and open conversations and then action plans to really say, what can we do to change things? So behind everything, like I said, the mission was, how do we create as much positive impact as possible, always centered around people embracing the multicultural and dynamism of the group that we had, and really thinking about, what's possible out there and what can we do together.
Yeah, I always say the same in community-based places. There's so much, there's a lot of intelligent people out there. And when you just make them talk to each other, incredible things can happen, right? Co-creation and stimulating your mind. And obviously, sometimes in our professional lives, we are very siloed. And you just talk, if you're an engineer, you just talk to engineers. Or if you're an artist, you just talk to artists. Whereas the intersection of disciplines is where the actual magic happens.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, your society puts us into these kind of, like you said, silos or categories. And I think that's one thing we found. I was working in finance at the time, and every network or community I was part of would say, okay, this is for finance people. Oh, this is great for finance people. Or it was socioeconomic. Are you this particular bracket in society? Or it was based on your, cultural background or your religion. And for me, that goes against the ethos of the multicultural melting pot and this idea of, what's possible whenever, like you said, when everything comes together. And from a social perspective, it's one side, but then on the business side and impact, how can we truly really make changes if we don't understand, what's actually happening around us, or the people, the communities, the cultures, the ideas that are happening around us. So this is where I really thought that if I had the beauty of this group of people, how can I curate and give them the right frameworks to have the most impactful conversations, or the impactful events and meeting. And that's exactly what we try to do. It was honestly the best way to spend my 20s. I couldn't have asked for a better.
I can imagine.
It was super fun. And when you look back and now you're in a different sector, and especially when we're looking at this in technology and how technology, there's so much, a lot of the work we do is about how do we network, how do we share our new story, how do we tell people about this new idea or this new innovation. We end up in these kind of echo chambers of the same people, because it's like the telco people are talking to telco people, and the quantum people are sharing more quantum updates with quantum people. But it's like, how do we break those boundaries and go to the people that don't know about what we're doing? Because that's the person that's going to move you from, your little box to actually scaling out and making it, universal, or at least accessible to people. So I guess that background has really kind of stuck with me now, and it's something which I can see in tech is really missing. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys learned a lot through the process. And obviously from this community-driven approach, you guys ended up focusing a lot on sustainability and the UN Development Goals. Can you please tell us a little bit about the key initiatives you have been part of related to these UN Sustainable Goals?
Yeah, so I think, when we started the Oblique Life, it was a lot about how do we shape different people, and then how do we help them find their balance. And at that kind of time, this UN SDG framework had just kind of come to life, and it was it turned out it was a kind of fortuitous moment where we were doing this. We were invited by a company to do an event for them, or at least help them promote their brand. And the brand was actually, it was this called Together Band. I don't know if you've heard of this Together Band. It was a kind of charity done in conjunction with UNICEF and a lot of different celebrities.
Yeah, I think so.
And they had different bands for different sustainable development goals. And this was our real first insight into this intersection of culture, social, people, but also the SDGs, and how we could have such a role in shaping what was, what could be. And as we dive deeper into the SDGs, we realized that when we spoke to our members were the group that were going to have to make these goals a reality. And we had this opportunity. My brothers and I were always passionate about what we can do for impact. We all studied geography. Well, two of us studied geography, for example. My other brother studied Spanish and business. So we always had this international kind of, what can we do? And growing up in Kenya, path was always, how can we give back or support? And we said, this is the perfect time to have an inflection point in what we do. And let's step up our kind of messaging and say, look, we want to be an advocate for the SDGs and use our influence, however big or small that was. And we then started thinking, what initiatives could we do? So the first step was saying, okay, like number one, let's create specific discussion groups around specific actionable areas. So one was, for example, the future of sustainability in business. So we had different working groups would invite speakers to kind of talk and then shape and help people understand what they could do across different businesses to really bring the SDGs into play. Then COVID came. And as we were starting this whole program, we're like, wow, what do we do? But in a way, it was a bit of a blessing because we got this time where people had time. So we accelerated and scaled up the number of discussion groups pretty fast. And we were doing about one every day.
Yeah, it was part of one.
Exactly.
So
then we had one on the future of business. We had one on sustainability, specifically how do you bring the SDGs in. We had one on the future of Africa, how we can support our diaspora. But everything had a link to saying, what's the impact you create? And it didn't have to be about explicitly saying we are going to support this SDG or that SDG, but having that framework in your mind and knowing what's possible, what the goals are, we helped shape these conversations. So we have this sub kind of path. The second thing we did was we started this workshop where a few of our members, they really wanted to do something more than just be part of a discussion group. So we created a framework to help a random group of people come together and find a common sustainable development goal they wanted to support, and then hack, however you want to call it, co-create, co-build a solution or a plan to go and help solve that. And we embarked on this, which became a really nice framework that we started taking to organizations and the kind of corporate side of when we evolved into the corporate part of the Oblique Life. And that was really great because this actionability was such a good education process, but also made people really understand what it takes to go from awareness and, okay, this is what's out there, to actually making something happen in reality, and also the difficulty of doing such things.
Yeah, getting your hands dirty is when things actually start to get real, right?
And you realize that, oh my God, that idea that I had, maybe it's not going to work in the country that I want to do it in because the infrastructure is different, the technology levels are different, the education levels are different. So that was a really powerful, and that was about, a good, I think it was about a 3-month program that we did. And we got to the point, and this was again, during the height of COVID, where we came together, we found a group, we found a core goal, a core mission. But unfortunately, we tried to put that into practice, but as everything after COVID happened, life kind of changed. And then, because of all this and these different events and learnings I had, I said, one thing I can control, which is in my own hand, is the awareness and further education and going deeper. And in particular, what I learned was that everything you read about and the way that we innovate in the West is a Western-centric innovation model, where it's we have an idea, great, let's take it to Kenya, to Ghana, to India, to Bangladesh, because we think this is a super idea. But we never ask the innovators in Bangladesh or Kenya, what are you thinking about? And then how can I merge my technology into what you need? Because they understand the needs much better than we do.
Yeah. I guess it's the arrogance of the developed countries coming and saying, we know better.
Yeah, arrogance, but also just the naivety of us, because sometimes you want to help and you're so, it comes from a good place.
Yeah.
But people just don't know that what innovation is actually happening. So I thought, what about a podcast where I have try to make it balanced and have a global South representation of innovation and a global North, all cater on how we reach and support the SDG goals. And that's when the podcast came to life, which you were part of, which was really amazing. And then we started going deeper and realizing there's different elements we could really shape: technology, governance, and then obviously policy and education. These were all the kind of core building blocks. So yeah, those were all the different projects we did. And then on a personal level, I supported a good friend of mine, Miroslav Polzer, who's part of, he does a lot of work with the UN, the UNFCCC for climate awareness and action. He's been doing that for more than 20 years now, and he invited me to join him at COP26, which was a really incredible kind of inflection point in my own vision and journey. And I think the more you get involved with sustainability-related projects, you start seeing that there's so much business and opportunity that can be created from it. And I just thought, let me try and spread that and advocate it more.
Yeah, well, and it's a great mission to have internally, right? So you mentioned, individuals, organizations, and policy. I guess they all go together, and they have to go together. And coming from the telecommunications industry, where policy is super important and regulation as well, right? And we are very responsible as well. Technology that connect people is very important in the context of inclusion, education, and tech for good in general. So, how do you think that in general, if you grab all of these UN development goals and understand that technology is what's going to drive the actual change, how can individuals, businesses, and policymakers work together to actually achieve that? Because most of what we see is a lot of talking in the likes of COP26 and the further events that happen. A lot of people getting around the table with good intentions, but how can we get into the action?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult question, but I think when I went to COP26, it gave me a really good, I don't know, I guess awakening. And in one sense, a lot of the media and press talks about the kind of staleness of the lot. The larger the organization gets, the less can be done, the less is happening. It's all lip talk, it's greenwashing. And yeah, maybe to some extent, a lot of the companies do that. However, I think I saw a different kind of lens of it. One was that the individual motive and action and the spread of that that contagious like push for me and you as inspiring individuals can inspire our friend groups, our colleagues, other people. And that's the starting point of getting the change in motion, because people start asking their bosses, their employers, I want to do this. Are the UN SDGs part of our company mission and vision? What are we doing for our carbon footprint? Oh, I don't want to work for a company anymore that has this. So the individual, yes, it takes longer and takes time, and maybe the sphere of influence is smaller, but I think there's a lot of role that you can have. And the more you stand for and the more you want to change and the more you can influence other people around you and get that collective kind of movement, that is something positive. And I think we are seeing it now in society. I'm sure when you're having employees and new staff looking, they ask you these questions in interviews, what are you doing?
Yeah, not so much around the UN development goals in general, but you see parts of it being asked, especially in the younger generation. So for example, about diversity and inclusion. And as a business, how does our culture align with 21st century way of doing things?
And that's SDG 4 and 5.
Exactly.
So it's embedded in, like, the SDGs are just like frameworks or labels, but deep down they kind of seep through. Then on the organizational level, yeah, I mean that's a lot harder, but I think that's where the government policy, everything kind of interlinks. I mean, if you look at the EU, it has taken the strongest step forward to really start pushing carbon related penalties or legislation that enforces changing the way we do business, thinking about how do you adhere to the SDGs, looking at we have to start, we're going to with the ESG framework. Now there's a lot of questions and loopholes in all these different frameworks, but if we look at the bigger picture, and when we look back maybe 20 years time or 30 years time, these things will all hopefully at least start that trend. And if one or two companies start really being successful, then others will start following. I think that business leaders need to be, the leaders at the top need to be braver. They need to stand for it stronger. And that's not easy when your board doesn't support it, or when it's a tough year financially, when we have all these other external factors and you've got to pay your employees and the bottom line comes in. It is difficult. But I think that's where, if we link back to the individual, if you do the education, you do the learning, you start understanding what the potential opportunities are and you reframe it, business leaders can be these shining examples, and they have the power. And I think we're in a world now where organizations are starting to have, in some cases, even more power than our governments.
Absolutely.
So they have a huge role to play.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to government, I think that's the most difficult one, because I think we've seen that policy, of course, is super important. And the more policy that can be, I think the biggest challenge in policy is the speed at which policy can be actually implemented. There's a lot of discussions, debates, awareness, but how can we create, the institutions that allow us to go from something that's really important for the environment, for example, and get that into action, rather than having to go through loads of cycles of debates and get stopped, and then we're here 3 years later still debating the same topic. For example, it could be like the cleaning, like water. If you look at one of our episodes in the podcast, we talked about water and access to clean water. It was shocking to learn how polluted water in the US is, how US water basins are horrifically filled because there is such a weak legislation on the chemicals that are allowed to be put in by companies or by agriculture. So, it just goes to show that very simple things which could be easily done, and it's a no-brainer, like putting in certain toxic chemicals into water it's a no. Why should that be a debate? So I think that's an area where it's difficult. That said, though, again, having more youth and the next generation involved is also good, because they've got a much more, they're pushing and they're much more adamant and active about making things happen. So it's a bit of a convoluted answer, but I think, if we look at them all together, each one interlinks into
I guess it's the pressure from underneath, right? You have to be competitive to the workforce. You have to remain attractive to hire talent, because otherwise, as an organization, you're not going to make the numbers. And obviously then there's also the innovators and the young generation coming and saying, well, with tech we can actually solve this problem. And then obviously policymakers coming in and helping those new businesses actually break through and get into the market. Sometimes that market is very difficult to get in, such as, for example, the telecoms industry, which we need the policymakers to come and help reduce the barriers of entry. At least one of the things that I have learned over the years is that conversation between policymakers and, I would say, the young generation, creating the businesses that are going to disrupt the industries and are going to solve those problems, is really important, because the policymakers need to understand what's going on in reality. And that's one of the things that I'm super proud of having a business in the UK, because that happens.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, look at the global leadership profile. I mean, the President of the United States is older than most people's grandparents.
Yeah.
Not to say he's a good or bad politician, or he's not educated.
But he's not represented.
But how is it? It's not exactly. And I think if you take that as one example, and then you think, let's go different layers, like how are the global South represented in the G20, when majority of the young population is in the global South, or the problems are in global South regions. We have to think about these like you said, the conversations between the policymakers, the individual, but also the right mixes of these people. And I guess that's one thing I saw with Oblique, is when you bring people from different backgrounds and they have a chance to air and share their view, their point, that empathetic relationship, you start understanding each other. It changes it, because you could have had a view that was just completely wrong. But you didn't mean it. You just didn't know better.
Exactly.
And that's really important. And just one other thing, which was, I think, on the kind of policy level, I think if we see it in the UK, you're right. It's a good. We have a great support for entrepreneurship and startups. And I think the more you create a place for young entrepreneurs, even any entrepreneur, a really strong need for trial and experimentation and growth and innovation, that is the best way to show people that there's opportunity. And I think if you can bring that together, and you can shape funding and policy and give access for people to say, look, if you are building businesses for good, you're changing the way, you are innovating to find ways to make money, but also make an impact, and give that support, it's the best way to find solutions, because then we start really thinking out the box. And the incentive is you'll get a grant funding for these types of projects. You will get business support, or you'll be match funded, and this is, I think, really, for me, that's the best place. And I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm biased. I feel like, but that's how you can, again, bring those two together. And I think you've done an incredible job at working between the policymakers and the entrepreneurship community. So we can learn from yourself, Maria, how you do that, and other entrepreneurs can see that it is possible.
It is, certainly it is possible. And I think the getting funding into the right hands, absolutely, it's going to be a game changer. So I think we both agree that technology can play an important role in actually addressing these UN sustainable goals and most of the problems that we have in the global south. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the quantum technology, because I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it, and it's really hard to understand because obviously it's a very complex topic. So let's first start with what's your definition of what quantum computing is, and what are the benefits and how it can create an impact in society.
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, look, I'll give my version of it, and I hope this is clear. But I think before we go into quantum computing, what I always try and start with is why the quantum. And I think one thing that the whole premise and the kind of science behind quantum computing comes from quantum physics and quantum mechanics. And if you go back to basics and you look at some of the greatest scientists of our time, if we start understanding the world, we start seeing that everything, all the processes, all the atoms, all the molecules, everything that makes us, everything that we eat, everything that we use for energy is based on quantum physics. So take that as one starting block. What if we then can create technologies that leverage our most natural formation to really help us change the shape of things? And that kind of paradigm shift from the way computers are built today, which doesn't look from the quantum physics perspective, that allows us to start looking at much more complex systems, looking at the whole interrelation between different systems that exist in molecules and atoms. And that's when quantum computing started becoming like, this is the first example of bringing quantum physics into something useful. So what quantum computing tried to do was say, look, there are certain problems within our world that we cannot solve with even the best computers today. Why? Because we've evolved our computers and these amazing chips. I mean, you're seeing everything with AI and what's happening. But at a certain point, because of the sheer number of different variables or parameters you have to factor in, these chips will not be able to handle that computation. It will take years, thousands, millions of years to do it. The quantum computer works completely differently, and it uses quantum physics to say we can look at multiple different scenarios and states in one kind of view or one computation, let's just say, to put it very simply. And that's what quantum computing will do. It will help us solve these complex problems that can't be solved today. It allows us to do things faster, so things take a long time. So for example, if you're looking at trying to reduce the empty miles that cars or vehicles are traveling, like for trucks and delivery, really normal thing we all suffer with, even when your Amazon deliveries are late or your groceries or whatever it is. The challenge is that, to look at all the different scenarios of things that happen, whether it's a traffic jam, an accident, somebody's ill. I could go on a list endless. If you want to say, okay, how do I give the most optimal route? That calculation will take so long. By the time that it's calculated it's gone already.
It's gone.
But with the quantum computer, you can dynamically pick and adjust the routes in the best time. So you're minimizing the time and to get your delivery, but importantly, reducing wasted miles. So trucks are no longer driving 100 miles with nothing in them because it was the best version of route they could do.
Yeah, and it was also planned offline. And not online with all the entropy that the world has, which is traffic jams and
the chaos.
Exactly.
You can't factor in the chaos of the world. So thinking about this and this kind of optimality, one way to describe when we look at it is if we kind of give the analogy that if today's best computers are bicycles, quantum computers are aeroplanes. They can do things in a totally different way. They can look at things, they can do things fast, like I said, more optimally, they can get more accurate. So for example, another example is in healthcare, when you're looking at heart or different surgeries using different lasers and other technologies, that's changed the shape. But this 1 millimeter, 1 nanometer of error could be fatal.
Yeah.
We can, with quantum computers, get even more precision and more accuracy, which could reduce that fatality or the damage that it can do to certain organs, things like that, which is hugely beneficial and also reduces massive costs on the medical side.
Okay, and how does this look like? Is it a new chip? Is it a new way of computing data because if you ask me, then I mean, I know about digital signal processing and FPGAs and stuff that it's used to grab data and do very fast calculations. But how does this quantum computing look like?
So there's different layers to it. So at the fundamental level, yes, it'll be new chips and new computers, which again leverage the properties of quantum physics. So the core thing is using the principles of superposition and entanglement, and we use these things called qubits to compute. That's the hardware side, and yes, that is we've seen a lot of progress on the hardware. In the last 5 years, we've gone from really rudimental toy problem or in the lab computers to now, like, I wouldn't say definitely not commercially ready, but at least now you're seeing businesses making sure they experiment and try some of their problems on these computers, but they're still not ready to compute industrial level stuff. But then you have quantum software. And this is an interesting kind of paradigm, because if you think about software, some people go, oh, but isn't quantum computing just the hardware? No. If you write the program, if you create algorithms and you write your software solutions with the mind of these quantum computers, your logic is different. The way you program is different. The kind of tools you use are different. And what we've seen, and this is where my company and what we do, which is really exciting, is you can take these quantum software solutions and you can run them on some of the existing best hardware, GPUs. I mean, NVIDIA has like really done an amazing job, especially
I think between AI and quantum, NVIDIA is going to be with blockchain, and then
yeah, I mean, basically they have somehow, well, let's not say somehow, they are riding the technological journey, and this is the kind of bridge to what's possible. So the software plays a massive role, and what you see in the market today is a lot of these software companies being able to build these like more optimal algorithms or better algorithms than what some of the best that exist, which is really exciting. The fact that you can already, through software, leverage parts of quantum. Now, obviously the hardware is not ready, but when it is, and you can migrate these onto the hardware, you're going to see exponential improvements. So there are certain, but I just want to caveat, quantum computing is not for every use case. It's not for every business.
Let's get very specific then. What is a tangible use case that you have brought to the market with Terra Quantum?
Yes, I mean, there's quite a few that we've brought across different sectors, but the three main domains are optimization, machine learning, and simulation. So if you think optimization, I gave you one example already, which is like looking at optimizing routes. So anything where you have a lot of different, like it's called combinatorial complexity or an NP-hard problem for those who are more technical, you basically have lots of options that you have to factor in. Quantum computers can give you the optimal path faster and more accurately or more optimally. So that's, route optimizations, or anything with scheduling, for example. If it's in a factory, if you're scheduling tasks and jobs. If it's for airlines, how do you, pair your airline crew to the right airplanes, factoring different disruptions? I mean, think about the amount of routes that are being flown for some of the larger airlines. Then on the machine learning side, it's thinking, okay, how do we, train models or actually find more prediction accuracy? So one great one is what we do with solar power. So one of the biggest challenges with solar power is how can you accurately predict the output of the photovoltaic cells. And currently, because of weather prediction and how being able to predict the weather, there's a lot of inaccuracy in some of these predictions. With quantum computing, you can much more accurately predict the output, and you can reduce, or we have what we call higher prediction accuracy. Hugely beneficial, because it means firstly you can increase or predict better your output of solar. You can lock in better prices into the grid. You can increase the total amount of solar that you're actually using versus non-renewable energies. So there's a whole range of outputs that you get from that. And then the last one is simulation, is thinking about, for example, how do we look at different scenarios. So for example, when you think of in financial services, for example, if you're looking at pricing or evaluating risk, you have to factor in lots of different scenarios, and a common way of doing it is using a Monte Carlo simulation.
Yeah.
Now this Monte Carlo simulation takes very long, lots of compute.
Never converges into an optimal solution.
It doesn't. And you'll have lots of different solutions. It's hard to find what's the optimal. The quantum, with certain approaches, you're able to actually dramatically reduce the time it takes to look at these simulations. You can increase the number of scenarios you can look at, and you can get to the more optimal one much faster.
Okay, so let's say it's a combinatorial solution finder in like on steroids. That's
yes.
hard.
Yeah, I like that. The combinatorial solution finder on steroids.
I mean, I did a lot of research on telecoms, and a huge part of my job was to implement these Monte Carlo simulations or other types of genetic algorithms to find solutions to NP hard problems. And I remember setting my simulator at night, and then coming the next morning and finding that I forgot to tune one of the parameters. Therefore 12 hours of simulation and computation were just
gone out the window.
Exactly. And I needed to start the day, and I did not have my results there yet. So I think as a PhD student, and
you appreciate you know exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly. It would have been great. And I want to get into that skills piece, right? I mean, obviously, as a PhD student, I would have benefited from something like this. Talent, skills in tech is something that's really hard right now. We're losing talent to other industries that are becoming more appealing. So what would you tell the young generation with regards to either tech for good or quantum in order to motivate them to come into our industries?
I mean, I think there's a few things. One is that in one sense, and maybe I come from a different perspective, starting my career in finance, which was when I joined was for those who are not have no tech background or anything, it was the industry to go to.
Yeah, which is the one that, I mean, I had a hard time in the university lab retaining talent being 2 blocks away from the city. Right?
Yeah, because you basically have, I mean, it pays the best, and
and
the career trajectory is good. However, I think things have changed. I think now when I think about it is tech underpins every industry. And I learned that in quantum because you asked, where can you apply quantum? And what I learned was it's in every sector.
Yeah.
It's more about finding like specific types of problems within each sector, which is what we do a lot of. And given that, if you are a physicist or a mathematician or you enjoy science and you love it, the most exciting part for these people today is that there are going to be so many more jobs and opportunities in this because we are craving and looking for these specialists. So my advice is if you firstly enjoy these things, there is now at the end of that journey a really good job available for you and something practical you can do with it.
Yeah, but that like the mathematician and the physicist is already kind of like interested in tech or sciences. What do we do about all of the people that have a role in this industry? We need to market this. We need to sell.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. And on those people, that's the even other more exciting part is because the fastest and all the businesses are going to grow are going to be in tech, or they're going to have technology. And actually, what I think is interesting is that it's when and what I can see is we're moving from like a tech industry to more that industry is tech underpinned now.
Yeah, exactly.
So now it's more a case of people if you want to innovate, you want to change. Being a tech savvy is no longer, oh, that's a really cool job. If you aren't, you're now going to be, looked aside because people who are tech savvy are going to jump you in the queue because everything is underpinned by tech. So I think that's one thing that's exciting is that there's so many opportunities and there's so many things you could do with it. And actually, like what we're craving for, especially in these deep tech industries now in sectors where we're at the earlier stages, is getting this diversity of mind and thinking now. In fact, if you are not a scientist or from deep into quantum or nanotech or biotech, they're looking for people who are business people, who are even more generalists or have other experience because they need to scale and grow. And that, like we're talking about diversity of thought, is really important. I mean, that's how I got the job at Terra Quantum. I have no experience in quantum computing or technology really.
But who cares?
Exactly.
At the end of the day, right?
And that's my message to people is if you really want to make a change and do something different, technology is that and is the enabler. And if you can find these industries and these opportunities and if you want to make change, you want to do something different, that is, as a business person, the best place to be when you have those tools.
Yeah.
So it's a super exciting space. It's only going to grow. And the crazy thing, I think, is also like, we have to keep innovating, because now look around the world. When all the best jobs were in Europe, the US, and in the UK, suddenly now the global south is opened up. Like they've innovated,
and they're doing so much stuff, right?
Exactly, and the opportunities are massive. So I think it's, if the message is, if you really want to innovate or do something, you got to get aligned to tech, get with the program. But secondly, let that help you, and you can do crazy stuff. Whether you want to be an entrepreneur, whether you want to join a business that's doing something, everything for me is around, will have some element of tech in it.
Yeah.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it's very motivating, which is what we need, right? We need to motivate people to come into our industries. And I always say the same from a telecoms perspective. We cover everything from the silicon all the way up to software and cloud and all the cool stuff.
But I think on the telecoms,
we do a terrible job marketing it.
You do, you're right. And that's the problem, because that's why you need the marketing people to come into telecom and storytellers. Because what I learned is the view of telecoms is the mobile phone providers, or maybe like
which
BT,
everyone hates.
And those, exactly. But behind that, there's hundreds, thousands of other parts of the telecoms communication system. And people just don't understand. And I think this is what's exciting, is that tech allows disruption. And the more people that can come and talk and storytell about this and share, that's why we need like all these people to join. Like, it's exciting because we're in a position where the whole, who uses a landline now? I mean, what happened to the landline? And then, like for up until I was 16, that's all I knew was, mobile phone.
Technology evolved.
Exactly. And now the cycles are even faster. So this is the place to be. But I think one thing I'll just give caution to the wind is that you still, you have to do your research, go find it, and just don't expect it to come to you on the table, because a lot of people I do hear from, yes, they see the Googles and they've heard about all these unicorns and they want to be part of, I want to join the tech.
Exactly. I think the companies that attract the most investment are the ones that then are going to probably attract the most talent. And obviously that's not always the case. I mean, Quantum is attracting a lot of investment, but from the telecoms perspective, it's really hard because of the lack of knowledge that exists in the industry. And we don't have this, unicorn valuations, and obviously that makes it really, really hard. But I do agree that bringing money into those industries help bring in talent, because that's how Google, Meta, and AWS actually managed to attract all of the young people, right?
Absolutely. Is that? But also the caution to win there is, if you're just joining to be part of the next unicorn, that's not really the end game of being part of a technology industry. The whole point.
But that's fine. But it's not everyone wants. Not everyone's motivation is to change the world, and that's perfectly fine.
Exactly, everyone. But what I have found is that people get not every company is going to be Google or Facebook.
Yeah.
And that's a realization I guess I share with people, is that, listen, you can do something really impactful, or even you can even make a lot of money, but you might not end up being the Google. But that they shouldn't be the kind of like the only benchmark.
Exactly.
There's so much more depth in this, and I think like what you're saying is so true. Is that, yes, obviously, but that's why when you talked earlier about policy and organizations, it's those kind of relationships and partnerships that where, for example, it might be hard to get funding. Partnerships play such a role. So I have a lot of friends who work in telecoms in, for example, Africa, and what you're seeing is huge partnerships between telcos, banks, and then startups in between.
Yeah.
And these kind of partnerships are really great because the telco guys, the big guys, don't want to do the really innovative stuff, or they are doing it, but they can't. They're limited. The banks don't want to touch it either. So there's a massive space. But where there's no maybe private funding or government funding, these partnerships create those opportunities. So there are lots of interesting ways. And I think like that's, if you're looking for jobs, if you're looking for opportunity, there's so many places to find it now. And everybody's looking for passionate, hungry, innovative people.
Yeah. Good. Well, Romi, thank you so much. It's been great to chat with you about all of this transformational technology and potentially change the world. Yeah, so let's just give our audience a closing remark. Anything that you think people should leave this conversation with in their minds?
Wow.
Short and sweet.
I think, look, the world is ours to shape and change. And I think if you are somebody that wants to make an impact, do it. Don't wait for somebody to tell you it's possible. Start creating your own journey now. And that's why we're here with Maria. She's a great example of that. And thank you to Weaver Labs for having me on your, talking again. I think we us as industry make this together. It's super exciting what we can do.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, and thank you.
Thank you.